My daily solutions. This is the podcast that we're singing all about. It's what the people can't stop talking about. It is the Daily Solutions Podcast.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Welcome in. Graham here.
My name's Ashkan.
And today's question is, what do you do if someone opens a float center with the same name as yours?
Oh.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, I guess it depends on where they are.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for legal recourse, that has a lot to do with
Or
it.
for how much I would say it matters or you should care about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if someone's like on a different continent than you.
And you don't intend to expand to that continent
And you
in the
don't
future.
intend to expand to that continent in the future.
So let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
There's the legal routes that you can go, and then
Sure.
there's just the non-legal routes that you can go. And the legal routes are going to be a lot easier if you have a copyright
Well,
on
this is assuming
your
that
name, or
you want to do
a
anything.
trademark. This is assuming that you want to do anything.
What I'm saying is like, I mean, so like someone opened Float On in Hong Kong,
And I wrote them a letter asking them to change their name.
Well,
And I wrote them the same in Australia. There's a Float On Australia. I wrote them a letter asking them to change their name in Australia. They don't have to listen to me.
they don't have to listen to you, but I feel like there's a certain amount where like you could not care about stuff like that. I mean, if someone's in a completely different country that speaks a different language halfway across the world and you're running your brick and mortar business and you're a city, I really don't think it's probably a big deal, will ever lead to any issues for you, will ever even be known by almost anybody other than you. And it might be at the point that you don't care and don't need to do anything about it.
Should still send him a letter. It's my opinion. I think you should always try to defend your name a little bit, even if they have no reason to listen to you, even if it's unlikely to affect you in the long run.
I guess you can at least make them aware that you exist.
Yeah. Make them aware that you exist with a letter from your lawyer. That's been no, I didn't send lawyer letters. I didn't send lawyer letters
in those circumstances.
All right. So let's ignore international. Let's say that someone's open on the other side of the country.
Okay.
You're on the West Coast and they're on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Now you're okay.
Now I'm asking.
How do I feel about that?
Yeah.
Now?
Now how do you feel?
That's at the point that I'd be like, yeah, I'd go down the route of trying to have a conversation or seeing if someone, would be willing to change their name or just recognize that maybe it's not the greatest idea to have multiple float centers out there with the same name. But it's still the type of scenario that if someone were to go forward with it, and again, your plan is to run your float center in your area and you're not trying to open some giant franchise or something like that, that at the end of the day, I still don't think that's going to impact your business really. Like it maybe when someone searches something on the internet, but at this point, most browsers are going to show you things based on your location first. And so I would prefer if it didn't happen, but I, again, don't think it's like of humongous consequence to your business.
I think we have like vastly different opinions on this, actually. I absolutely would not be I mean, again, foreign country is interesting too. Like the difference between being like someone opening on the East Coast of the United States and Maine, and then someone just over the edge of the border in Canada. It's like a very distinct legal difference, even though geographically there's not a huge difference there. And either way, I would still prefer that they don't run with the name Float On, for example.
Sure, I mean preference, yeah. I would prefer nobody else had the name Float On, but
yeah, I mean to the point where we took out a trademark on it, right? So that's the protection that you can do. If you don't want anyone else in your country or in other countries opening up with your name, you can get a trademark in your country, and you can actually get trademarks specifically in other countries as well, so that you can kind of control that. And one of the deals with getting a trademark is also that if you go that route and your intention is to enforce the trademark and defend your name or your logo or whatever, you're also required to enforce it, right? So if you have that trademark and then you start just letting other people use your name or you don't go after them, then your trademark kind of becomes invalid. You can't pick and choose and say, well, some people are allowed to use something that looks like our name or sounds like our name, looks like our logo, and I'm not going to go after them. And then these other people do the same thing and I am going to go after them, that in a court of law might not hold up as well. Mm-hmm. And again, we're not lawyers, so keep in mind this is all secondhand information too. We're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. in national trademark registration. So that's nationally, right? If you are in U.S. and Canada, I think a trademark for U.S. and Canada is a good idea. Getting a trademark in the U.S. and getting it in Canada as well. And at that point, yeah, you can send a letter. So from my perspective, if someone opens on the East Coast, I'm not going to send them like a letter from my lawyer or something like that and immediately come down and be like, hey, you're not legally allowed to open with this name, right? Like that's...
I mean, in general, it's usually, I don't think, the right way to start almost anything, right?
Yeah, like skip straight to just like pulling out the baseball bat and going for their knees or something. That's not how you want to have a conversation, right? So I mean, I think it's like everything. You want to be a human being and just talk to them and say, and I often like starting out saying, hey, I'm not sure if you even knew about us, or if you, if you knew that we existed, or there was another center with this name out there, but we do exist, and we'd appreciate it if you picked another name. It's not a bad letter to send out.
Yeah.
Stating the number of years you've been around is often a good idea too, or how many clients you've served it just kind of puts it in perspective for them. And at that point, they can decide to listen to you, or they can decide to not listen to you. And if they don't listen, I like trying to get a phone call, right? So it like starts with an email or a letter. And I'll say that most of the time, like those have been received well. I think this has happened, within the country 2 or 3 times that people have tried to open up with Float On as the name. And it's happened overseas twice. There's the one in Australia and the one in Hong Kong. So I guess like 5 times that we personally had to deal with this one. So most of the time a letter works. A phone call I think is great. Or an in-person meeting if they happen to be somewhere in the vicinity to you that doesn't require too much travel is also good. And oftentimes that's also enough. If you get on the phone, you just explain your side of things. And you're like, hey, I know you wanted to start up. Like, it's a really tight-knit community. It's very small. It's not like there are 50 float centers in a city like there are, restaurants, hundreds of restaurants in cities that people can go to, and you happen to be on the other side of the country and using the same restaurant name, right? Like it's just such a smaller community. Can you understand that this could get confusing, or if one of us wanted to expand, it could cause problems and, maybe choose something else? And I think that's also usually received well.
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, especially if people are closer within the same country.
Yep. And then there's they still don't want to change it after that, right? And so then that really does come down to, do you have a trademark or do you not have a trademark on your name and your logo? And in fact, if you didn't, even if you were open first and they're the ones who registered a trademark on that, that can be bad news bears for you as a business. And you might actually even need to end up changing your name and logo depending on how much they're going after you or what kind of route they want to take. Fortunately, again, we ended up with a national trademark, so I think it's only kind of come down to that level of conversation once, where it seemed like they're like, hey, I appreciate that, but we're going to go with Float On anyway, And at that point, I just very nicely said, okay, well, we do have a national trademark on this, and you actually can't do that. And I think they were actually a little confused about the process of looking up those trademarks and thought that they had been doing due diligence and thought that they were actually the first sort of legal Float On opening up, which obviously wasn't the case in this one. And even then, again, like being nice and not assuming that they intended the worst or that they're out to get you or anything like that. Like even in my letter where it's saying, hey, here's the legal document that we have protecting this, was framed as understandably as possible. I think I even used the word, like, I know all of this stuff gets incredibly confusing, and I'm sure that you're just kind of a little lost in the weeds here. And yeah. So that's fine. So you wouldn't even try to enforce it on the East Coast? Getting back to what...
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I think we have a difference of how much we think this would, like, at the end of the day, actually affect us. Like, I don't think there's any scenario where I wouldn't, like, send an email or something like that. But, like, if someone across the world or something like that, like, I just really don't think it's going to actually matter in the long term. And, like, the closer it gets to you, the more I think it does matter. And, like, within the same country on the opposite side of the coast is, like, that middle ground where it's like, yeah, I'd try, and if it didn't end up working out. I mean, in this case, we have a trademark, so it's not going to work out.
Right, yeah.
But in the case that you, like, the case that you don't or something, and this is just getting crazy, like, I would step back for a moment and be like, okay, is this really going to be, like, a huge deal for my business or not? Or, like, are people actually going to get as confused? Am I going to lose business? is someone going to come try to float at my float center, pull up a website for someone in Florida and fly across the country to float there? Like, I don't think so. So it's not preferable, and I'd put work into trying to avoid it. But I do think it's not like, I mean, to me, it's mostly almost like future-proofing sort of stuff. Like, you don't want to get to the point that other place all of a sudden now is like a huge national franchise and opening 5 centers all around you. Like, that's kind of worst case scenario, which is not necessarily, I think, the most like likely or statistically probable thing from happening. But that's why I think mostly we're trying to protect ourselves from it.
Yeah, and there's even things just with conversations with float centers. Like a lot of and you'll see totally different float centers with different owners who are running their centers in different places in the same country, like in the U.S., and they're fine with it. And sometimes those centers have actually called and checked in with each other. A new center opens up with the name that you have, or let's say you're a new center that's opening up, and you're looking around and someone has that perfect float name that you wanted. Reach out to them, see if they care, right? Don't just start with that name and wait for them to find out and then reach out to you and ask you to stop. Sure. Like, I mean, we've barely stopped people from like who are ordering brochures and about to order their giant signs and stuff like that, right? And we have to come in and be like, you can't use that name. The end result is they're like, I'm glad you told me early. It's like, yeah, you should have told us, right? So yeah,
if they know,
if they know. But if you are one of those centers, again, starting up and you do find someone who has the same name as you, give them a ring. Even if you look up national trademarks and you find out they don't have one, it's still just the courteous thing to reach out and make contact.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so I didn't mean to like bulldoze you on that one. I
mean, a lot of like, other than like, I think our values of how much of a terrible situation this is. I mean, the advice is all the same. Like, call people. Like, it's not that expensive or that difficult to get a trademark. It's not like this is a huge, crazy decision you have to make financially or in terms of the work you have to do. I mean, it costs some money, but like, it's affordable and you can go through it. So there's not like any great reason to avoid it or not have one if you do want to protect yourself.
Yep. All right. A divisive epised, but if you have any
divisive
more,
is actually,
I think it's pronounced divisive.
You pronounce it divisive.
I think it's divisive, actually. If you have any other questions for us, go to floattanksolutions.com/podcast.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Bye, everybody.